have Nic Carter with us, who, much like me, started his job at Fidelity Investment, and much like me, probably would still be there if they paid better.
I can't comment on that.
Nic, welcome to the show. Welcome to the best. Thanks so much for being on the merge. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So, like us, you watched Vivek, and I was kind of scurrying around here trying to get the show started and whatnot, and then I heard him say choke point, and I was like, oh, wait a second, he's talking my language, and I know he's talking yours. What were your thoughts?
He's our guy.
Yeah.
Vivek is our guy. Both Vivek and RFK Jr., who'll be speaking here later today, have commented on choke point 2.0.
Right.
Both of them. That's a key win that we in the crypto industry have been able to make this part of the political discourse.
Right. Absolutely.
His speech I was tremendously impressed by. Do you notice that in 20 minutes of speaking, he didn't use a single filler word? No ums or nothing. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, that's unique.
He's an electric speaker, and his crypto platform is just completely in line with everything I believe. He said abolish the Bank Secrecy Act. It's unconstitutional in my opinion. He said he would reduce the size of the federal bureaucracy by 75%.
That's interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He said that he would strip the SEC's ability to enforce crypto regs, which is a little strange because the SEC doesn't have any specific crypto regs.
Right.
They just use their existing body of laws to enforce. So I thought that it was a little bit of an odd comment. But, he talked about the third-party doctrine, which is a really problematic, feature of the banking system. Pretty much everything he said was in line with sort of what I would want in terms of my wish list for sort of federal crypto policy. So I was very impressed.
I mean, I'm just glad he's putting that out there in the conversation. That's something that we haven't really, I would say very few politicians, most of which are probably going to be here at this event, who have gotten it right. Like Ted Cruz is very on point with what the topics he talks about. I don't hear a lot of politicians that are talking about it intelligently as well as with the right policy positions.
Yeah, I mean, he has clearly been paying attention to the issues that matter on crypto Twitter. He clearly is getting advice from some pretty sensible people.
Right.
Pretty sensible crypto people.
Possibly your tweet stream.
I saw shades of some of my tweets. I don't know. I'm not accusing you of anything.
Sure.
But in terms of the political commentary I've seen from mainline candidates on crypto, that was the most sophisticated and the most complete presentation I've seen to date.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I have been a follower of your Twitter account for a long time. You're always on some campaign. You were one of the first people to talk about Bitcoin and energy outside of a few real less followed nerds that are inside the industry on a wide platform, gain traction with what you're saying, and seem to move the needle in the discussion. That's what caused me to follow your goings on. And since then, you've had kind of a stream of causes where you've kind of, I think, moved the needle in important ways. The Hamas funding allegations that came out of the Wall Street Journal ended up in congressional hearings. You had a bounty program. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
That was interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I think you should always have a cause.
Oh, absolutely.
It gives you meaning.
Yeah.
What is life but a search for meaning? So my current cause is I think that the chairman of the FDIC should resign.
Okay.
Marty Gruenberg, architect of choke point 1.0 and 2.0, unconstitutional programs to get banks to deprive whole legal industries of banking access, initially with the firearms industry, the adult industry, second time around with the crypto industry. He was the architect of that. It appears that the FDIC has a rampant culture of sexual harassment, and so the Wall Street Journal actually reported well on that. He should resign for that. But return to the WSJ, they had some pretty questionable reporting, I thought, on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or it was actually Tether and Tron. It wasn't actually Bitcoin being used to fund Hamas. And, it was interesting. We were able to complain loudly enough that they actually issued a correction there. The problem was that Elizabeth Warren cited that reporting in her letter, which was signed by 100 members of Congress. And that damage is done. The narrative on Capitol Hill is established.
Yep.
That crypto is the linchpin of terror financing, even though it's very evident that they have conventional means of financing themselves. Iran is a state sponsor, Hamas, like they're probably not using crypto as the main way to, they actually just have conventional banks,
Yeah.
Hamas had an account at Barclays. Okay. So obviously crypto is a tool in the toolkit, but I think it was overstated in the WSJ article. And I think they dramatically overstated the numbers. I think the consensus among the elite chain analysis firms now is that that headline number of 130 mil was not accurate. So we had a sort of partial win there by getting them to correct the article, but a lot of the damage has been done.
Right. Well, I mean, I saw even Cynthia Loomis had seemed to kind of like been confused by some of that narrative because she issued a statement, and she typically is very well informed on these things. She had said something about Binance and Tether needed to be investigated criminally or something like that after the whole Warren situation.
Yeah.
Is that kind of being dialed back now that the corrections have been issued, or is that kind of...
I think even with the kind of most conservative members of Congress, there's a national security agenda which often clouds crypto policy or informs their views on crypto. So I understand, her position on this, which is probably the narrative around crypto funding terrorism or just illicit use of cryptos is overstated. But at the same time, there are these pretty unaccountable actors, Binance and Tether, which are the main tools used by illicit actors. Right. The thing is, though, and I had heard the opportunity to connect with her team on this, and I gave them this feedback, both Binance and Tether are very active in interdicting illicit flows.
Right.
I mean, if you look at Tether, they freeze addresses all the time.
Right.
So from an actual law enforcement perspective, that is a kind of a desirable feature of the system, right?
Right.
If you talk to these, law enforcement agencies, even individual police departments, the fact that you can go to a Binance or a Tether, and they do this, and say, hey, we've identified these wallets, these addresses, could you freeze them? That's a good thing, right? You can't do that with cash. With the correspondent banking system, it becomes very difficult, especially on a transnational basis, to actually... So the fact that these firms are nexuses of activity and readily do freeze addresses, that's actually quite a good feature.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of a different take on it from the senator.
For sure.
Switch around to a more traditional question. When it comes to your investments in Castle, what do you look for in traditional investment in the blockchain, the digital economy, and kind of tell me a little bit about what you see in the future, like things that some trends you see happening.
We do all kinds of stuff. I think we've made 70 or 80 investments over the last 5 years, mostly equities as opposed to tokens. And right now, a lot of the focus is on stablecoins, actually. I mean, that's clearly the discussion being had in Washington, too. But what I'm seeing is the emerging moneyness of stablecoins in developing markets. That's a real thing that's happening. And that's what's lost in the conversation about terror finance. These organizations, as illicit and obviously morally, questionable as they are, they have begun to treat stablecoins as money. And it's not just them, it's the entire sort of economy in the global south.
Yeah.
So we see this among ordinary, regular civilians and firms all over the place.
Sure.
Name your country: Turkey, Argentina, Lebanon, Venezuela.
Hyperinflation is not our friend, right?
Yeah, Nigeria. We're active in Africa. We see this in the data on the ground. So that's where I'm leaning in right now, is fintech firms that are built on stablecoins as opposed to correspondent banking. Remittance firms that are powered by stablecoins. It's a big change in the structure of the financial system. At the same time, we're still doubling down on Bitcoin. So
sure,
I know that's a kind of a big question people have about us. We're funding Bitcoin L2s. We're funding Bitcoin ZK rollups. We're funding tools to integrate Bitcoin with other blockchains, right? So I think that's essential. Bitcoin is not being left behind at all. But at the same time, I will acknowledge that the explosive growth I see in crypto right now is real economic usage of stablecoins. And that's a pretty exciting thing to me.
I mean, I think even just to put a button on that law enforcement discussion, if you are law enforcement, if you are a sophisticated international law enforcement agency that's concerned about terrorism, you would probably want a lot more stablecoin usage because you don't have to deal with jurisdictional wiretaps and data requests overseas. It's all on chain.
Completely. And I'll be interviewing executive at Chainalysis tomorrow. He was a former FBI agent himself. I've had some revealing conversations with him, and he said exactly the same thing. I wrote this in a Medium post recently. If I were a member of the FBI or CIA, and not to be accused of a Fed, but if that were me, I would want all illicit fund flows to happen on blockchain.
Right.
They are permanently legible, right? There's a permanent indelible mark of what you did. You don't have that with cash, obviously. You don't actually have that with banks either, because people just move through these correspondent banks. It becomes very hard to trace what happened.
Right.
So kind of more of a black box. And of course, you can actually interdict these flows. So the sort of crypto paradigm is a much better one for law enforcement. Obviously, we have to balance that with the need for individual privacy and transactions. But yeah, I think that's being completely lost in the discourse.
And I suspect that actually kind of speaks to your stance on the digital cash standard, right? So how would you kind of integrate the digital cash standard that you're...
Yeah, I think that over the last 40 years, as we've sort of electronified finance, we've lost the ability to make cash-like transactions. We've just lost it.
Right.
Of course, you can still transact with cash, but if cash was invented today, wouldn't Elizabeth Warren say it should be illegal, right?
It's too many ways to print.
It's untraceable,
Yeah.
There's no record of cash transactions, right? So as finance has moved and become electronic, we've surrendered the right to have transactional privacy and autonomy. We've just lost that. So I do want us to return to that paradigm. I see crypto not necessarily as this techno-optimist movement, but actually as a restorative movement to restore what we had in the past and what we've lost.
Right. So I want to go back to what you were talking about with your investments. So you talked about a lot of L2s in the Bitcoin ecosystem. What are the most promising things you're seeing there? Obviously, Lightning's the gorilla, the elephant in the room. What's the other stuff you're looking at?
Yeah, so I sit on the board of a Lightning company. We're bullish Lightning. I think for a certain kind of payment, Lightning is superior, especially small granularity, high frequency payments with final settlement online, especially for content monetization, stuff like that. At the same time, I don't think we should rest on our laurels as a community, and I don't think we should just have a single payments layer on top of Bitcoin. If you look at the dollar, there's not $1 L2.
You got Venmo, you got Cash App, you got wire transfers.
Yeah, you have wires, and you have all these different trade-offs in the design space.
Right.
And the key variables are settlement speed, settlement finality, convenience, right? And so because it's such a multidimensional optimization problem, you have different networks that satisfy different... They operate, at different nexuses on that sort of multivariate continuum. And so we have fintechs, we have ACH, we have wires. There's a huge number of different ways to send dollars around, obviously. Why shouldn't that be the case for Bitcoin?
Right.
Right.
So I was blown away when I heard, I think I was listening to one of the podcasts, and they talked about Spotify and how many different payment rails there are.
Yeah.
On a daily basis.
Shopify.
Shopify.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I was like, wait, what?
Spotify's a lot of...
Yeah, sure. But I was as a financial professional, we've got Swift, ACH, Wire, right?
It's changing all the time, too. Visa has rolled out actually a new real-time settlement system. Now you have FedNow. I know we say end the Fed now.
Yeah.
We have FedNow also in the U.S., which I think is a little bit unfairly maligned, actually, by Bitcoin. I don't think it's a CBDC. But so the payments, the sort of fiat payments infrastructure is always changing and innovating, too. And I think we should do the same for Bitcoin. I think there should be ZK rollups, maybe even optimistic rollups on Bitcoin. We should take the things that we've seen get product market fit and traction on other blockchains and see if we can adapt them to Bitcoin. So I don't think Lightning is the panacea. I don't think it's the sole objective. And if you rewind in history, Bitcoiners on Bitcoin talk forums back in 2013 were having these discussions. I think, unfortunately, the intellectual atmosphere in Bitcoin became a little stifled, but I'm optimistic that we can kind of emerge from that and fund and support and build other ways to move Bitcoin. Maybe that means tokenizing and settling on other blockchains. I don't think that is too questionable notion. I'm support that, right? I just want as many ways to utilize Bitcoin as possible.
Spectrum is the decentralization is a spectrum, right? So it's like you say, it's the levers and dials.
Yeah, people make convenience trade-offs, right? Like if you want to, send a payment for dinner to your friends, you might use Venmo. That has different settlement qualities from a wire transfer.
Right.
So like that's the analogy with Bitcoin. If I want to send you a large amount of money with Bitcoin and have it settle finally, relatively quickly, we do an on-chain payment. But if, we are willing to accept different settlement trade-offs, we'll use a different system.
Right.
So I just want to explore that full design space. I'm pretty optimistic about where the community is right now in supporting that.
That's fantastic.
It's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you coming and joining us here on the Merge today.
Yeah, this is great.
Is there anything in particular that you actually want to shout out, tell people about what you're working on, or something in particular?
So much.
Winning lottery ticket numbers.
We need to get the chair of the FDIC to resign. Marty Gruenberg, you have to resign. Okay.
So let's dig into that. We got a little bit extra time we can go into if you want. Yeah. So if you want to go into like the meat and potatoes, because we kind of brushed past it fast. What's going on with the FDIC aside from the sexual misconduct allegations and the choke point stuff? Yeah.
Look, Marty Gruenberg's been at the FDIC for almost 20 years now, I think.
Okay.
So whatever happened there, he's presided over that.
Right.
So if there was a rampant culture of sexual misconduct at that agency from 2010 to now, dozens of people, that's on his head. He ran the organization twice. But really, in crypto, if you work in crypto, you run a business in this industry, you have been victimized by the FDIC. You just may not know it.
So you're saying like he's kind of, or him and the FDIC are the source of a lot of the choke point things. I always thought it was kind of an emergent property of like maybe the banking industry, but you're saying it's kind of coming out of that organization.
It was more planned than people think. It wasn't the banks that spontaneously decided to de-risk the adult industry or firearms manufacturing industry.
So that's well documented.
Or the payday lending. It was an explicit program that was hatched. The first one was called, this was the government name for it, Operation Choke Point. That was their name.
Yeah.
And they were so brazen, they're like, yeah, we can put a name on this thing and we can weaponize the banks to unbank industries we don't like. Now that's unconstitutional because that's like going to the water company or the electricity company or the phone company and be like, you need to suspend service to these individuals, not because they've done something wrong, but because we don't like them. That's it to these legal industries. Banking, you need a government charter to be a bank. So I consider it effectively an arm of the government. And in this country, it's not constitutional for the government to do that, to deprive an entire legal industry of a basic access to banking. Of course, you need that to operate your business. And so this was weaponized against crypto starting post-FTX collapse in November 2022, stretching through 2023. In my opinion, it caused the collapse of those crypto-focused banks.
Oh, for sure.
Because it wasn't that those banks were super risky and they just collapsed spontaneously. They were fragilized by the bank regulators that said, oh, you have to take down your crypto exposure to 15%. You can't have a business model. You need to get out of this business of crypto. That caused their business model to collapse, right? And so over the course of 23, if you were a US-based legal business in the crypto space, you were deprived of your banking access most likely. And the FDIC was the prime agency that was responsible for that. And by the way, it hasn't ended yet. It hasn't ended yet. This is still an agenda item for them. It is coordinated across the whole financial regulatory apparatus. The Fed is involved. The OCC is involved. But the FDIC, of course, the SEC, the FDIC is the most culpable agency. And for that, frankly, Gruenberg should be forced to resign. Of course, the sexual misconduct is very troubling as well.
Right.
But yeah, I consider it a heinous crime. It's one that's not that well documented. And it doesn't comport with American values.
I've had a difficult time with FDIC and SIPC and some of these different organizations that are there to theoretically protect you from, bank runs and things like that because...
Well, they haven't even succeeded at their main mandate.
Yeah.
The FDIC is mostly irrelevant now because there's a broader kind of soft implicit guarantee of banks from the Fed now.
Right.
So the agency they create moral hazard and then they're not even really doing their job when they were fired.
I try to speak to people about the moral hazard all the time, and it's just, it gets their eyes to roll back in their head. I know that I've overstepped at that point.
Yeah, look, my most red-pilled belief is that depository insurance is actually not accretive to the stability of the banking system. So you've had examples historically of banking systems with absolutely no depository insurance that were stable, because the insurance encourages banks to take risks.
Right. Yeah.
And so the presence of insurance actually causes more ultimate fragility, which is now being backstopped by the Fed and by money printing. That's not a great situation. Everybody pays when a bank fails with inflation. Well, we're all paying for the failures of the banks now with inflation.
One of my comments that Mark had brought to my attention was that Tether was buying so many, Treasury securities, and I started thinking to myself, I was like, okay, and we just saw the dealers take it in the teeth on the most recent auction, and so my thought process was, there's only so many people that can buy these, and if you can actually regulatorily legislatively capture someone else that's going to be forced to buy these treasuries.
Yeah, look,
there's another problem.
Nobody wants to buy our debt right now. China is divesting. Japan is divesting. There's structural selling of treasuries in the market. Meanwhile, stablecoins, about 130 billion of new demand for treasuries, and the U.S. government's trying to outlaw that. It doesn't make any sense. That's a big buyer of our debt. That'll keep our debt cheaper for everyone.
Right.
If you add up all the stablecoins and you treat them as a sovereign nation, they'd be the 16th largest holder. The 16th largest holder of U.S. debt.
So with that in mind, my question on money supply, I also think that a big part of money supply is interesting. And that, it used to be the checks and savings were part of M2, but now everything can be monetized in a matter of days or hours. So I kind of feel like money supply and their grasp on it is not as tight as everyone thinks.
It's tenuous, especially with the Eurodollar market that they don't directly perceive. There's more Eurodollars than there are dollars. But yeah, moneyness is an adjective. A lot of different things have different degrees of moneyness now. And I don't think the Fed is grappling with that very effectively either.
It's fascinating test. Again, well, thank you so very much for coming on. You were a wealth of knowledge. I really appreciate you stopping by and talking to us a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck with the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for watching The Merge. We've got a ton more stuff for you to watch on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, everywhere. Check us out.